And hello, everybody. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to McDuff Lives. And gosh, it's good to have our good friend George Webb back. Welcome back, George.
Hey, John, great to be with you.
Well, we talked last week about some very important medical issues involving Dr. Patrick Soon-Chung, who you've been covering extensively. And after that, it occurred to me to look into HeLa cells for a little while, and I found out to my surprise, that HeLa cells were in fact the product. Well, not found by Tuskegee, but the proliferation of HeLa cells for research purposes was done under a contract to Tuskegee Institute back in 1952, 53, and it shocked me because as someone who's read this great book, A Conspiracy of Cells by Michael Gold, and tried to study as best I could what HeLa cells were and what dangers they present, nothing in the book indicated that the mass production of HeLa cells was done initially at Tuskegee Institute, of course, a historically Black college. And it's just fascinating to me to know why they chose Tuskegee to do this. So you have done some work and done a couple of substacks touching on this, George. So let me turn it over to you and fill us in. What can you tell us about HeLa cells and Tuskegee?
Well, you may remember the syphilis experiments,
Sure.
and the syphilis experiments didn't last. The people say, "Oh, the syphilis experiments were in the 20s, right?" No, they went all the way up into the 80s. It was 60 years of syphilis experiments. And why did we have the Black population mainly as the target of the experiments? Well, because they had no voice, they were poor, they needed medical care, and they had no choice to sign up for whatever kind of experimental vaccine at these major city hospitals, right? So and plus you can do it over generations, right? And this is the original Henrietta Lacks, where she goes to a Baltimore hospital for her original cancer treatment, and they find out, hey, you got cervical cancer, and they use her cells. They take her cells out of her private parts, to basically create what they call immortal cells. And the reason why immortal cells is important in this cancer discussion is normal cells only divide in a petri dish, once you take them out of the human body, about 30 times. They only divide in the body about 30 times, some only 20. And so there's this limit that you're constantly having to redo your cells and your cell line. It's a real hassle. But if you have immortal cells, they'll divide continuously forever. And this is why they have the book title, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, because they're still using Henrietta Lacks cells in all these cancer labs all over the world, and non-cancer labs all over the world, even though she's been dead for a long time, for over 60, 70 years. They didn't tell the family and so forth. But it's this idea of immortality that's so crucial to cancer. And it's this idea of what triggers immortality in your cells in your body. I know you've got cancer, you've got the prostate cancer. What triggers those things to go wrong? The P53 is your natural brake that gets, maybe gummed up. What reactivates the cancer? All these are the key questions, and that's just as important as SV40. SV40 is a huge important thing with Ed Haslam and Dr. Mary's monkey. And did that cause the cancer explosion, or was it HeLa cells, or was it both?
Oh, I've got a technical issue here. Just a second.
Okay.
Hello, I guess. Yeah, I wanted to just show this NIH report that what I read over the weekend by Timothy Turner. It's Development of the Polio Vaccine, a historical perspective of Tuskegee University's role in mass production and distribution of HeLa cells. Now, I mean, I guess I could repeat the question: why isn't the role of Tuskegee Institute famous for producing all of these HeLa cells. And I think it has to do with existing racism in the 50s that perhaps, geez, if somebody knew that a Black person had touched these HeLa cells and then they're using those HeLa cells to create the polio vaccine, and maybe I don't want to get infected by Blackness or something, that kind of crude racism, which was pervasive and still is in some places. So why indeed would they have kind of hidden it away in the Tuskegee Institute?
Well, I think they were trying to see what caused cancer. They had a lot of Nazi scientists coming over from the old paperclip. They had done a lot of Nazi experiments. You've covered that in the book about the Nazis and cancer. And they were trying to pick up where they left off with the Nazi death camp experiments that people, though that kind of gets pushed under with the whole Holocaust, it kind of gets pushed under the radar. But they were continuing these experiments. These Nazi scientists that we brought in at NIH and so forth, we were continuing these experiments at places like Tuskegee. So that's the other part of this, is the covert, illegal, not asking anybody's permission type experiments. Chester Southam and Alice Moore famously went in like 61, 62, something like that, to the Ohio State Penitentiary, and they, inserted HeLa cells directly into, prisoners' arms. But what I'm saying here is that's one of the very few things that we've seen above the board, as far as experimentation with cancer cells. It's much probably more dangerous to take a woman who is menstruating, right? Or, in the private parts area, and have HeLa cells in the cervical area and swab there to cause cancer, if you're trying to study cancer, than it is shooting the HeLa cells into prisoner's arm like Chester Southam and Alice Moore did. Again, where are you going to find a whole bunch of folks that are at these public hospitals, that are poor public hospitals, that are willing to be swabbed with HeLa cells in their private parts? Well, Henrietta Lacks was one of them, and there's a whole bunch of other Henrietta Laxes that we don't know about. So that's the other thing, is the covert, illegal, without informed consent that occurred here as well.
So you're suggesting that not all HeLa cells come from Henrietta Lacks?
What I'm saying is they do come from Henrietta Lacks in order to cause the cancer, but if I want to study the progress and the pathology of the pathogenicity of HeLa, okay, I want to go from when is the tumor a little tiny tumor, and then when does it get to be 2 centimeters and 3 and 4 and 5. So I want a movie of the cancer. Okay, well, I want to take the Henrietta Lacks cells that I know causes cancer, a giant tumor in her. I want to cut it up, and then I want to put it in a syringe or a swab, and I want to put it in that same area where I know the conditions for her original cancer were, which is, again, not in prisoners' arms in Columbus with Chester Southam and males. I want to put it in females that are ovulating, right, to go back to the original conditions where Henrietta Lacks' cancer was. And then I want to cause as many cancers. I know how horrible this sounds, but I want to, if I'm, I can't remember the doctor's name. I think it was Gay, was Gaye, but they were putting these Henrietta Lacks cells into these ovulating women, and then causing cervical cancer, and then taking slides and swabs, and then seeing the cancer grow. Oh, here we are at 1 centimeter. Here we are at 2 centimeters, right? And now I've got a whole bunch of basically guinea pigs that are out there. And again, it's over time. These people
I haven't read anything along the lines you just described. You're saying that Dr. and his name is Gay, Gey, but it's pronounced Guy, like it was German, because he is German. His parents are German, and his heritage is German. So Gey is an old German name, so you would pronounce it as in German, Guy. And the proliferation of these HeLa cells certainly stems from George Guy's sending them everywhere against the wishes of Dr. Nelson Rees, who originally was I think he's the first one to discover that these cells didn't die, that they were immortal. And the story told in The Conspiracy of Cells is that this HeLa cell is so aggressive, it takes over other cells wherever it is. So if you thought you had a cancer cell from a prostate or a lung or anywhere, and you were going to study it and try to figure out what makes it grow, why does it mutate, and why does it divide without apparent end, you would study, you would try to find some human cancer cells of that type and then study them in your lab. But what happened was that the HeLa cells were so aggressive that they took over all of the lab samples of any human cancer. And so these folks that thought they were studying the various different cancers were all in fact being fooled by HeLa. They thought it was a kidney cancer, but it wasn't. It was a HeLa cell. So to try to suppress this from infecting all the labs in the world was the effort of Dr. Nelson Rees, whereas Dr. George Guy, who is with Hopkins, has the opposite idea. He wants to put them out everywhere. And the reason for that is because they want to develop that polio vaccine that was ordered by President Roosevelt and supervised by a man named Basil O'Connor. And Basil O'Connor, who for some reason is the head of the board of trustees of Tuskegee Institute, is the man who steered the mass production of these away into Tuskegee. So Tuskegee becomes like a factory for HeLa cells and sends them. They're making like 10,000 of them a day or something. They just have this huge production capacity, financed, of course, through the Roosevelt administration's programs. And so it goes everywhere. But it's known that these are HeLa cells, and the purpose of it is this. To develop the polio vaccine, they had been using, as we know, the rhesus monkeys. And these rhesus monkeys cells were the substrate, which is what they grow the virus in order to study it. So these rhesus monkeys, there's only so many of them, and they can't produce but enough cells to meet the demands of the medical community, that everybody wants these HeLa cells so that they can use HeLa cells for the substrate instead of the monkey cells or the rhesus monkey cells. So it is becomes a huge money-making proposition. And once Tuskegee has developed the process, the workflow of how to get these things to divide and multiply, separate into different batches, and send them out to labs all over the world, then suddenly it goes back to the medical community. A lab is created in Bethesda, Maryland, out of an old Frito-Lay factory. And this group called Microscopic Associates, if I have the name right, now starts cashing in on selling the HeLa cells. And so to me, it looks to me like the scientists at the Tuskegee Institute were simply used to develop the procedures that would effectively create a mass production machine. And then that mass production machine was taken away from them and used for research and also for profit by the medical community that likes to make money as well as save lives. So that's part of the story that I just wanted to highlight. And now we're talking about HeLa cells, which are in themselves oncogenic. They will cause cancer under certain circumstances. The part of the HeLa cell that is dangerous is the one that suppresses the p53 gene, the tumor eliminator gene, just like SV40 does. And it's called E6. It's a protein that is part of the human papillomavirus. So the idea is Henrietta Lacks had this virus. I'm not sure it's completely certain that it was HPV that she had, but she had some kind of disease that was giving her cancer, and the science assumes it was HPV. And then that HPV, because of its nature, contains this E6 protein. So the danger then arises, well, if you're going to use HeLa cells to grow vaccines in, like COVID vaccines or flu vaccines or, polio vaccines or any other vaccines, you better be damn sure that HPV factor, the E6 protein in particular, does not escape from the lab into the vaccine that you're going to be injecting or providing orally to millions and millions of people. And for all the research I could do over the weekend, I can't find any evidence that this E6 actually appears in any of these vaccines, whether it's a corona vaccine or a polio vaccine. Whereas there's plenty of evidence that SV40 does appear. So that's where I'm at. I think that the idea of making sure that using this substrate of HeLa cells is safe is probably one of the most important things that medical technology has to conquer. But as far as I can see, there's no evidence that it ever escapes from the lab and causes cancer outside of people who have HPV themselves. Of course, then the E6 is going to be a factor in their lives that's going to attach to the p53, just like SV40 does, and attenuate its ability to stop the growth of tumors.
Well, can I just walk back to the original place where the cells come from, and let me go through point by point. First of all, I met Ed Haslam. You've met Ed Haslam. We both went to Bradenton, Florida, and he wrote the book Dr. Mary's Monkey. And the premise of Dr. Mary's Monkey is the polio vaccine came from kidney cells from monkeys.
Yes.
Right? That's why it's called Dr. Mary's Monkey. And my comment to Ed is, what if it's Dr. Mary's maid? At that time, black women especially, were maids. What if the replication of the polio vaccine wasn't Dr. Mary's monkey, which is zoonotic? It's in a different animal. It's in a different place, a different organ away from the sex organ, right? What if the multiplication was done in fetuses, right, in Dr. Mary's maid?
Well, where would you?
Well, and here's my proof. You have to go to the public hospitals. You have to go to the Nazi experiments. You have to look at the people like Jim Garrison and so forth that all go and get the Nazi experiments and bring them to the Ochsner lab. Okay, before he does the Kennedy thing, Jim Garrison was the first guy into Auschwitz, right? Right, and then you have to look at what Dr. Guy was doing, which was swabbing and putting in, cancer. And the other piece of this is the radiation. What causes the cancer? We know if you irradiate a woman's ovaries during her pregnancy, you're going to get a cancerous cell that's rapidly multiplying, right? And again, I don't want to get into Dr. Mary's maid too much, but there's a lot more black women that were getting pregnant in America than rhesus monkeys than they had access to. So this is
that's speculation, isn't it?
No. This is where we had Planned Parenthood, we had these other things, and my point is that Henrietta Lacks was in this program. Henrietta Lacks was in this program. That's where the original cells come from, right? If you
He was
contend,
in what program?
well, if you're trying to come up with a rapidly dividing, you're trying to come up with a rapidly dividing cell uh, to make a polio vaccine, right? And I infect the person with polio, okay, and they also have cancer and it's rapidly dividing. There, that is going to accumulate somewhere in the body, probably in the human kidney cells, but probably in the tumor that develops in the black pregnant woman. But I'm just saying you have a lot better chance of creating cancer, right, in a rapidly developing environment with a black woman who's pregnant, right, by irradiating her private parts like they did in known experiments in the Nazi death camps. And they brought these scientists here to the United States. Austrian Lab's one of them. The public hospital is the lab we're talking about, right? There's the linear accelerator with Mary Sherman, right? So we're not guessing that the pieces and parts of this solution was there. Now I'm not saying that they didn't bring monkeys. I'm not saying that they didn't use the monkey kidneys to do this, but it's a much more removed situation than human cancer. You're
So,
talking about a different species.
but you're suggesting that something just horrific. I mean, it sounds like a Dr. Mengele project to find pregnant black women and convince them that you could to let you swab them with something that's got cancer in it, so that you can study the progression of the cancer tumors. Is there any evidence of that in any medical literature that they really did do that I'm not talking about the Nazis. I'm talking about in Western medicine.
I think you're going to find that there's a marker, there's a key marker. It's called the G6PD marker, blood marker, which is the marker of the HeLa cell. And you're going to find that cancer as you start doing these when you start looking at the tumors, that's the blood marker that shows you that it comes from the HeLa cell. My point is that you're betting on the monkey cells and the kidneys to be chopping up the kidneys and then centrifuging the kidneys and getting all the stuff that's not polio, right? And through all these purification steps, you don't have any of those steps with human cells, right? And once I have the HeLa cell, it'll divide in the petri dish. We know this happened with Henrietta Lacks. This is not speculation. Once it's in the petri dish, I don't need to irradiate the ovaries of the woman. I can just recreate the cell in the petri dish. And this happens all over the world in every laboratory, and not only every cancer laboratory in the world, but it happens in people studying a whole bunch of different diseases everywhere in the world today with HeLa cells. It doesn't happen with SV40 cells. That's all I'm saying.
Well,
And the key telltale is this G6PD marker.
but these women, I mean, for instance, Henrietta Lacks herself, the half of the story of Henrietta Lacks is the lack of informed consent. Henrietta lacked informed consent. And the suggestion you're making is that there are thousands, even millions of black women around the world that have been tested to see experimentally how fast their tumors grow by swabbing them with HeLa cells. And I just
not necessarily
that could have happened without some type of somebody would have said, "Hey, wait a minute, did you tell them that you're giving them cancer?"
Well, this did happen. This isn't something that I'm speculating about. It did happen. HeLa cells did result out of this.
When?
With Henrietta Lacks, when they swabbed the ovaries of Henrietta Lacks after she had this giant tumor. Once I get the HeLa cell, I don't need to do that program with black women anymore because I got it.
You're saying that they gave HeLa cells to Henrietta Lacks?
No, I'm saying that I think the cancer that Henrietta Lacks had was caused from radiation. I think that's Dr. Mary's maid. The story of Ochsner Lab is irradiating Black women who were pregnant at these cancer labs, and they wanted to come up with an immortal cell line. The story of Gay, he's saying as soon as the person, comes into the hospital and they're sick and we identify the tumor, call me. I want to get cultures of that as soon as possible, because that's going to become the immortal cell line. So we don't have, I can't say that there's thousands of women that had their uterus or, their pregnancy irradiated, but I know there's at least one, and it's Henrietta Lacks.
So you irradiate somebody in order to give them cancer.
Correct.
And then you take advantage of the fact that they have cancer, and you give them medical treatment to cure the cancer that you caused.
And they're also pregnant. So they're also coming in. Henrietta Lacks was pregnant, 4 or 5 different times. So they're coming in for free medical care at these free. We went to the city hospital in, it's shut down now, but in New Orleans and so forth. The initial program is what I'm saying is you have to have a lot of Dr. Mary's maids, and you have to use the urinary accelerator, and you have to get cancer. Once you get the cancer and you swab the cancer, the key to that cell is that it no longer has the limitation of what they call the Hayflick limitation, which is normally when you take a human cell out of somebody and you put it into culture and you give it all the food it needs, it can only divide 30 times. So it's not going to have immortality. The thing that they found with Henrietta Lacks is the cells that came out of her cancer could divide unlimited number of times. Now, also, the normal number of human chromosomes, which is 23 pairs of chromosomes, 46, went to 82 chromosomes. So all the cancer research work and most of the cancer labs around the world and most of the infectious disease labs around the world is done with, a mutant cell that doesn't have 46 normal human chromosomes, which is another scary thing when you're talking about 82 chromosome cells. So my point is I don't know how many women were irradiated. I don't know how many women were irradiated. I just know that one resulted, and that's all they needed, because they just needed to grab that culture and then just keep reculturing that, which is what Dr. Guy did, and then send it all over the world. And then everybody else is going to be working on your genome, which is the Henrietta Lacks genome. And that did happen. That's every day. Everybody works.
What happened to Henrietta Lacks, I think, is, it's definitely happened. But you're implying an intention on behalf of her doctors to irradiate her, not to cure her cancer, but to give her cancer.
Yes.
And you're saying that she was irradiated many times because she was going to that clinic in the past for her pregnancies. And whenever somebody got pregnant, they would irradiate them.
In these free hospitals, there was a program, and I can point to the Black doctors. I can point to the various labs. That's why I say it's Dr. Mary's maid and it's not Dr. Mary's monkey, where they got the original HeLa cells. And
Dr. Mary's maid.
Dr. Mary's maid. And here's the thing. Once I have an immortal cell line, then I can infect that cell in the Petri dish with the polio, and then it multiplies on its own. And then I don't have to worry about a kidney. I don't have to worry about a rhesus monkey. I don't have to worry about carving into a monkey. I don't have to worry about extracting the kidney cell. I don't have to worry about centrifuging and getting rid of all the crap. I don't have to worry about impurities. I don't have to worry about any of these things. And my point being is, we know that these things that went on to become used in vaccines, you got the polio vaccine, I got the polio vaccine, and we know, you look at Ed's book, chapter 8, 9, 10, 11, about the soft tissue cancers, we know that there was a hockey stick in all these cancers, right? So I'm saying, wouldn't it be much more logical, this is why I say it's Dr. Mary's maid, wouldn't it be much more logical, because you started with a cancerous cell with 82 chromosomes rather than a normal 46 chromosome cell to begin with to make your vaccine? That's how you ended up with all these cancers. rather than starting with the idea that this is a monkey virus that zoonotically jumped over from monkeys to humans and infected the vaccine. Now, I do see this SV40, to your other point, I do see the SV40 promoter in the shot, for the mRNA shots. I do see the promoter there, but there's 5 different genes you need, not just the promoter, right, in order to get to activate the gene. So I just haven't seen the connection. I can show a lot of connectivity between the E6 and between HeLa cells to cause cancer when it's injected, and that strong connective tissue isn't there for SV40 still to this day. Still to this day, a lot of people say SV40 doesn't cause cancer, right? The jury's still out on this. I'm not saying that the monkey virus couldn't have zoonotically leapt over, but it sort of reminds me of the same story with coronavirus. The bat had sex with the pangolin. The pangolin went to the fish market and infected the fish. The fish all grew wings. The fish flew to 140 different countries, right? That same sort of zoonotic story again, rather than, hey, it started out as a human cancer and that's why it causes human cancers.
All right.
In terms of Occam's razor, I think it's a much simpler story. Go ahead.
Dr. Bernice Eddy, well-respected, nobody's saying that her work was either wrong or somehow affected by political considerations or anything. Dr. Bernice Eddy said in no uncertain terms that the polio virus was infected with monkey viruses and would kill people. Not kill monkeys, but kill people. Why would she have said such a thing if it wasn't her firm opinion? And there's no evidence that she was wrong. I noticed there's a lack of study just to find out whether she was right or not. And that's one of the things that really suspicious to me, is that nobody has followed up and said, well, what was it? Another question, what about the Cutter incident? And also Dr. Oshner's grandchildren. When Dr. Oshner said, oh no, this polio vaccine is perfectly safe. And while people were challenging it, he said, well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to go down into the operating theater at Tulane, and I'm going to bring my 2 grandkids and I'm going to inject them. And darn if he didn't. And the boy died and the girl got polio. So what happened to them? Did they get, how do you explain those deaths other than that there was something infecting the polio vaccine that they were injected with?
Okay, so I don't want to stack too many together, but let me take them in order, okay? Because Cutter's, comes in there and you asked a couple of different questions.
Sure.
With Denise Eddy or Bernice Eddy. Remember SV40, how I got the name? It was the 40th vaccine that they had identified. There had been 39 other SVs before that. Viruses, right? Yeah. So I'm just saying they brought in all these monkeys. The story is all these monkeys had all kinds of viruses. The 40th one they identified at the first 39, are there, and then the 40th one is the one that causes cancer, right, in humans, supposedly, right? Even though, so first of all, where's the study on the first 39?
Right. Well, and Nick Potowski is I think on top of those. He has done as much collecting of those studies as anybody possibly could, and I'll defer to him on that. But the question is, did they check the first 39 to make sure that they're not also going to cause human cancer? Or did they just find this one SV40 and say, well, that's the one that's doing it without doing due diligence about the other 39? I kind of doubt it.
Right. Well, let's say you walk your way back and you say, what's the causal agent? Right. I don't think that's what Bernice Eddy did, but let's say it is. The first thing about cancer is it doesn't immediately manifest itself. So you have to connect the dots, like Ed did 20 years later. If you look at Ed's later books and Dr. Mary's Monkey, he connects the dots to cancers that don't erupt until 20 and 30 years later with all the soft tissue cancers.
That's right.
Some of them are later. So Denise Eddy would have had to had that longitudinal vision of who got the shot and then who ended up with cancer. A lot of the, like your cancer, if it's from the polio, there's a 30, 40-year window there, right? Between the causality and the effect, right?
Right.
So that,
Yeah,
so
20 to 30 years. Yeah.
so now Eddie, I'm not sure what year she came out and said SV40 was the definite causal factor. I don't have that data of when there was
I
causal
think it was
factor.
about 60 or 61.
Okay, so what I'm saying is, let's say the cancer polio vaccine 57, 58, the shot form, something like that, the oral one, 61, 62, the one I got.
A little earlier. The shot form was back in the earlier 50s, like 53, 4, 5, and 6, and then they pulled it somewhere around 55 or 6 because of the fear that they were giving people cancer. And so then Albert Sabin, who has been studying with MP Chumakov, comes up with the idea of, well, let's give them a live polio virus. They identified 3 different pathogenicities of different polio viruses and said, well, you know what, let's just give them the light, polio light, the attenuated but still a live one. But then that's what Dr. Bernice Eddy found, was that although they had stopped doing the injectable ones with the SV40, that lo and behold, the sugar cube oral polio vaccine also had SV40 in it. And that was the shocker in 1961 or 62. Then they said, well, we're not going to do that anymore. But the fact is, they continued using up the old stock through 1963, and by that time, I had gotten the OPV, and I assume you had too. So that process. Anyway, I just wanted to explain that.
Well, let me just walk back to your original thing, which is you corrected me on the dates, and you've been really focused on this, and I'm sure your dates are right. So let's say the original shot vaccine was 53, and then 55 is when they pulled it from the market because this is causing cancer. Remember who's getting this shot? Kids, right?
Yeah.
Right. So are they saying, did Dr. Bernice Eddy say that it's causing childhood cancers?
Well, I
Right.
don't know. All I know is that it was her in the early 60s that pointed out that, hey, remember what I told you about SV40? Or maybe they didn't. I don't think they actually identified SV40 until maybe 59 or 60. Wasn't it Hillerman that actually identified it? But they knew that there was monkey viruses in it generally. That's what Judy Very Baker says, is, yeah, we
Right.
knew there was monkey viruses, but the science hadn't advanced to decide, to enumerate them like 1 through 40 like they did later.
Well, my point is that even that would require an 8-year window, right? An 8-year window of saying, hey, I told you so. This is going to cause cancers. But again, you don't see a lot of cancers in children. Their immune systems are much better. So I'd like to see where, she created that causality. But
The
I'm
same
just saying,
question with Ed Haslam. How did he know that all these that all these soft tissue cancers, breast, melanoma, lung cancer, and prostate cancer were going to, he predicted it just like a Nostradamus. And, in 40 years, we're going to have an explosion of cancer because of SV40. Now I'm sitting here thinking we're having an explosion of cancer. He said it was going to be because of SV40. And now you're saying, well, no, maybe it was actually just the fact that there was HeLa cells that were used as a substrate to create the vaccine, right?
right. And so here's where the Dr. Mary's maid versus Dr. Mary's monkey issue comes in. I know when a woman is pregnant, right? I know she has a fetus. Okay. And I know that fetus is rapidly dividing. Okay. And I know in order to make a polio vaccine, I need a rapidly dividing substrate. Okay. A healthy monkey with a kidney is not rapidly dividing. The cells in kidney cells and organs, pretty much after the formation during the embryology, are pretty much not rapidly dividing. So putting something into a kidney cell and hoping it rapidly divides in an exponential way is not a real good strategy. The way to actually get polio vaccine in a rapidly dividing substrate is to put it into a fetus of a woman who was pregnant, because I can guarantee you that if I put those cells near those HeLa cells near a woman who's pregnant and that fetus gets infected, I am going to get a very rapidly dividing set of cells that are going to come out of that, which are going to be HeLa cells. And if that person is also, if their spinal cord has been infected or the cells have been infected with polio, I'm going to get a lot of polio vaccine out of this as well. Right. And so just on the, let's say we don't know anything about the future. We don't know anybody who's going to get cancer. And we were in a black room. Right. And you say, okay, well, we have Dr. Mary's maid. We're going to test on this side of the equation, and Dr. Mary's monkey, we're going to test on that side. Who do you think is going to get the most cancers here? The Dr. Mary's maid people or the Dr. Mary's monkey people? And the first person who gets up, I'm going to put this into a human embryo that's dividing at hundreds of thousands of cell divisions a day. Maybe not that many, thousands of cell divisions a day. And the other guy says, I'm going to put it in this kidney of this monkey, and there's 3 cell divisions a year. Right. And then we're going to do the math of a geometric growth of thousands of cell divisions a day from an embryo to see how many we're going to have at the end of 9 months versus how many do you get out of the embryo of a kidney. I'm going to get way more cells, like billions and billions more cells out of a human embryo than I'm going to get out of a monkey kidney. And I'm not trying to, I love Ed.
Well, yeah, let's not get off on whether we love or not.
Well, I'm not trying to defame Ed or any. I love Ed to death, but I'm just saying.
The trouble that I have with what you're saying is you're saying that there's all of these maids that were around that voluntarily let themselves be used like this that
Yes.
have never been reported in any.
No, they were, John. They were, John. They were reported. There was 6 doctors at Tuskegee. The 6 doctors at Tuskegee said that they were doing the amplification of the. You just put up the historical background, that paper. They were doing the amplification of the polio. The only thing that they don't say is we were using women's fetuses. That's the only thing, because that is the third rail of medicine.
So I have read this article 2 or 3 times, and I saw no evidence that they were using humans to reproduce HeLa cells. And it makes sense to me, with HeLa being that constant reproducing machine, that, as you said, they could put it in a petri dish and let it do all that stuff. So why did they need women to do it? And where's the evidence? Why haven't these women gotten sick and filed lawsuits and followed up on their the invasion of their bodies with?
I have the marker. I have the G6PD marker that everyone denied. Right, all the cancer labs all over the world said we don't have Henrietta Lacks cells. We're working on human breast cancer cells. We're working on leukemia cells. We're working on this cell. We're working on that cell. We're working on lung cells. We're working on all these different cells.
Right,
and it all turned out. The one scientist, like a Washington scientist, he said, well, why don't you look at the blood marker? Are all your patients Black women that are pregnant in their 20s?
Well, that was Nelson Reese in the book Conspiracy of Cells. He's the one that busted him on that. Right.
Right. So my point is that we know from the G6PD marker that those cells were used, and we right. So,
but you didn't need a female to create those cells anymore.
Right. I'm agreeing with you, but I'm just saying, if you just take the black box situation, right, in 1953 at the city hospital, we know I went to the place where actually the radiation column is. We know Dr. Mary Sherman had a radiator. We know her arm supposedly fell off because of radiation.
I think the Ed's theory is electrocution, George.
Well, Ed said it was electrocution, but I'm saying, I'm getting feedback all of a sudden. I'm saying that her arm was putting these cells under radiation all day long and didn't have the full appreciation of the radiation. That's why her arm ends up getting amputated during her murder, right? If
her arm was amputated during the murder, how?
Well, it was, remember, it was almost completely burned off.
Yeah, it was. I mean, if you look at the pictures, I'm sure you have. They're in Dr. Mary's monkey, although they're black and white. You can see that not only did it burn her arm off, but it burned half of her body open, so that all you saw was rib cage, and you could see the internal organs. And Ed has explained very carefully that all of this is a sign of electrocution.
Well, Ed and I can. Ed says they set a trap for her right at the radiation device, and then she unknowingly came in there and put her arm on it and was electrocuted. That may very well be true, but my point is that they didn't do the autopsy and they didn't perform the radiation poisoning aspect of her arm for a very good reason, because that would show that she was working with radiation. She was at a linear accelerator. Right. She was at something that was producing all these X-rays and various different waveforms. She was working with radiation. There's no question about that. I saw the column, there in the back of the Children's Hospital there in New Orleans. So
you can verify there was a linear accelerator there, and a lot of the accounts, if you read, they don't admit that there was a linear accelerator at all.
We saw the brick column. It's still there. We went to New Orleans. We went to Children's Hospital. We saw the brick column. My point in all this is to say, just think about it from a cell division point of view get a calculator out, and you show me how you get the polio cells to multiply in a dish. That wasn't easy.
That was why they were working on this in the first place, and that's why the HeLa cells became so important, and that's why they were able to sell them for good money to labs all over the world. Once they figured out that these things are incredibly aggressive, even in the same room with a lab culture. I noticed that it's BSL-2 labs are only or above that can even have HeLa cells now in vitro. Now we're running out of time, so I want to turn to what I think is a more contemporary important question, and that is the coronavirus vaccines, are they infected with something from HeLa cells? And secondly, are HeLa cells indicated as causation of what people are now calling turbo cancer?
Well, you mentioned the cutter industries, you mentioned contamination. It's much easier to have one person, Jordan Walker, in the case of coronavirus, you have one person who says, I'm an evil guy, I'm a lone gunman, right? That I want to be an evil vaccine executive, right? It's much easier to say that there's one person that introduces contamination than say it's state sponsored, right? We saw that with Lee Harvey Oswald, right? Oh, it's a lone gunman, right? And Jordan Walker is sort of the lone gunman of coronavirus to do directed evolution. No, it's not just Jordan Walker doing this, right? But contamination, again, when you're talking about a cell has 82, HeLa cell has 82 chromosomes. That has a lot of genes on it to help create an environment and an embryo, if you will, for replication. A virus doesn't have that. A virus, right, it needs another cell as a host, and there's 5 or 6 genes that the SV40 needs in order to propagate. There's only one of those in the coronavirus vaccine. The one Kevin McCurnig put out only had the promoter. And with cell reproduction, you need what's called EPOG. You need an enhancer, a promoter, origin, and then the actual gene. You need all 4 of those to be in. So it's almost like there's not all the things you need for SV40, even for SV40 to cause cancer in the coronavirus vaccine. There's only one.
I agree. I agree with you on that. I want to emphasize that Kevin McKernan also has admitted that the part that attaches to P53 is missing. It's called the T antigen, and the T antigen is not there in the SV40 promoter, whereas it obviously is there in SV40, the entire cell or the entire virus, because it is the effective deregulates the tumor growth by blocking P53, which is going on right now in my body at this moment as we speak. So
E6 acts like the T antigen. It's the spike, right?
it does, but where? How does it get into us today? Did E6 appear in the coronavirus vaccines? I see no evidence of it. Do you?
Well, that's the beauty of contamination. I went to the lab. We went to National Resilience in Alachua. When I almost died, I went to National Resilience in San Diego. That's who made the vaccines. Bobby Kennedy is right. Pfizer and Moderna just put labels. Those things were shipped out of Space and Missile Command in Huntsville, Alabama, to cold chains at UPS and FedEx. They went to CVS pharmacies under cold chains. Right? They're very fragile viruses. So you're following that chain, right? You're saying, well, it had to be somewhere in this chain. Well, that doesn't rule out the Cutter Industries. If I'm doing a test and I want to do it on millions of people, I don't have to do it in every vaccine manufacturer. I can just do it in a sixth. Cutter contamination was about a sixth of all the people making the polio vaccines. And now I've got millions of cancer experiments running around for the next 50 years. That was the Cutter contamination. I think it's going to be the same thing with coronavirus. I don't have to, every batch coming out of National Resilience, I don't need to know. I just need to know what batch numbers were contaminated, right? I just need to know those, because I'm going to follow those along and see how those people's reduced immunity works. And then I want to give them Activa to give them their T cells and NK cells back. I want to give them the BioShield after I see that they're going to develop this cancer. So this is what I'm saying. Contamination is one of those things no one ever looks at. But we know that's the story of the polio vaccine. The Cutter contamination is the whole story of how people got cancer in the polio vaccine. But yet we won't allow ourselves the opportunity that could have happened, even though we got a guy who says I want to be an evil vaccine guy. He's recorded by James O'Keefe saying I want to do directed evolution. He's on the LCD boards in New York with directed evolution right by his face. We've got a guy that we should start asking questions. Has anybody said, hey, we should go ask Jordan Walker, what were you doing? No investigation at all. So my point is that a HeLa cell has all the things it needs to reproduce. SV40 promoter all by itself doesn't have all the requisite pieces it needs to cause cancer.
We agree. We agree on that. What I'm talking about, of course, is the SV40, the virus itself that is the primary suspect, according to Ed Haslam, and can be found through lab testing. I know PCR has been used to find it. And I would suspect that if there was any HeLa cells in any of the vaccines that have been issued in the past 20 to 50 years, that it would be seen. I mean, it's not a virus. A virus is tiny, tiny, tiny. You might not see a virus, but a cell, I know, I looked it up. A HeLa cell is 200 times bigger than a SV40 virus.
Remember,
so you couldn't miss a HeLa cell if you were doing competent safety testing of vaccines before issuing into the public. You couldn't miss it, George.
Well, remember, they did miss it for 40 years in the most advanced cancer labs all over the world. And our bioweapons lab in Fort Detrick, they missed it in the bioweapons labs in Russia. They said, no, 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 no. You say there's HeLa cell contamination, Mr. Reese. We're working on breast cancer cells. You say there's HeLa cell contamination and we're working on cervical cells from the 1950s. You're wrong. We're working on lung cancer cells, right? Until Reese went and showed them the G6PD marker. And then they went, oh, shit. And that happened. If you read Conspiracy of Cells, that's what the book says. So it can be missed. As a matter of fact, it was missed for 40 years in the most advanced laboratories. There was professors that were like suicidal because they said, my whole life work is now out the window. Conspiracy of Cells, because I thought I was working on breast cancer cells and I was working on HeLa cells. And it is a way of hijacking other people's research. It's a way of polluting other people's work so they're doing work for you because you know the secret of the contamination, right? And you can take all their work now that they've done on breast cancer. Now you own that, right? You can take all the work done on lung cancer and now you own that because you know the secret of the HeLa cell. Conspiracy of Cells says that.
Yes. And when they found it out finally in 1961 or 62, then it was like a big gobsmack for everybody. They said, oh my God, these HeLa cells are so aggressive that even if they're sitting on a shelf across the room from my lab samples, it can infect my lab samples. But
it didn't stop in 61. It didn't stop in 61, John. There are still people today finding out that they've worked on HeLa cells their whole life. They're still finding out today because they didn't check for HeLa. Still, over the last 60 years, they're still finding out HeLa cells contamination today. So I'll send you the video of the guy who just did the speech at Washington State in Pullman, where they're like, oh my God, I just found this out. And again, if you're working with an 82, you would think, you're working with an 82 pair chromosome, that you would say, oh, that's HeLa. But they thought it was breast cancer. They thought it was lung cancer. They thought it was all these different cancers, prostate cancer, etc. And it turned out to be HeLa. Still happening today. It didn't end in 82. And I'll send you the guy's lecture.
Well, that's remarkable. George, I'm grateful for, you're one of those geniuses out there that can think way outside the box and bring home the goods from places where nobody expected it before. And I am certainly not going to sit here and say that I think you're wrong, because I don't know. I'm certainly not the scientist that can do that. However, I am going to appeal to people to see what you can find out, because if in fact this entire search for the cause of cancer has been completely obscured, I mean the HeLa cell E6 causative factor exists despite all the lab testing, all of the reports that have been written in the past 50, 60 years. We need to know about it. And so, it's a very interesting theory. I have problems with a number of parts of it, as you said, as we went along. I think you're aware of that. But geez, George, it sure is interesting to work through these problems with you.
Well, I'll just say one last thing about Dr. Mary's maid. I'm the obstetrician, right? If you're Dr. Gay, I know I'm going to be doing the abortion, right? From the pregnancy, right? So I know I'm going to get the aborted fetus. And as horrific as this is, saying that the aborted fetuses were diseased with polio and were infected with the polio, and the kidney as a filtering organ is what was the collection point, and that's why they use the kidneys of the aborted fetus as a natural collection point. As horrific as that scenario is, just sit down there with your calculator and work through the cell division and look at how often a kidney cell divides in a monkey and look how often a kidney cell divides in a fetus. And the math tells you the story. And it is the story of the 6 black doctors at Tuskegee. It's a horrible chapter in our, as I told you, I went to talk to all the black journalists, and they all believe in the Tuskegee syphilis experiments. But when I tell them about the Tuskegee Henrietta Lacks experiments, they say, no, that was in Baltimore. I say, no. That was right here in Tuskegee. So we'll leave it right there.
George, Webb, thank you so much. I wish we could spend another hour, but let's do it again sometime. And thank you so
Do it
much.
again.
All right,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you.
And thanks for your attention, and do the research. Look around, see if you can find some evidence of HeLa cells in causation of either coronavirus or contemporary turbo cancer. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, George.